Member Oak Bay, Gordon Head.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, on March the 5th, I asked the Minister of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources a question concerning regulatory inconsistencies in the provincial government's handling of Pacific Booker's proposed Morrison mine. I'd like to explore this a little further, Honourable Speaker. In 2015, after reviewing the project for a second time, the Ministry of Environment issued a Section 17 order that the project undergo further assessment. Despite numerous exchanges with the Environmental Assessment Office and the completion of an in-depth study of Morrison Lake, Pacific Booker has been unable to clarify the precise nature of what is actually required in the Section 17 order. For Pacific Booker, this order has been tantamount to a rejection of its project without the Ministry formally saying no. Government recently amended the environmental assessment process to provide certainty of process and clarity of regulatory considerations. When presented with an application for an environmental assessment certificate, the Minister is given three options under the 2018 Environmental Assessment Act. Number one, grant the certificate. Number two, grant the certificate with conditions attached. Or number three, reject the project. Pacific Booker's treatment doesn't align with the new assessment standards. They've been given the opposite of regulatory certainty, and their project has been shunted off for a further assessment. My question is to the Minister of Environment. Considering the recent changes to the environmental assessment process, will he amend the 2015 order to clarify the nature of the work required by Pacific Booker Minerals?
Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. I recall the question to my colleague, the Minister of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources in March quite well, and as the Minister of Energy and Mines said at the time, he and I can't speak to the specifics of why the old government made the decision that it made with respect to the proposed Morrison mine. The member is also correct. We made significant changes to the Environmental Assessment Act through revitalization, and we're proud of that as our government. We've brought new transparency to the Act. We've included engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities at the front end, and we have taken steps to ensure that good projects that respect the environment, that respect Indigenous peoples, and respect the public can be approved more quickly with greater certainty. However, with regard to Pacific Booker, the member is correct. Under the old Act, the decision was made to require additional information from the proponent before a final decision on the proposal was made. Under the new legislation or the transition regulation, there is no ability to take a project like Morrison that has proceeded this far down the process and transfer it to the provisions of the new Act. But it's my understanding that the company is currently working through the required regulatory process for further assessment in tandem with the Environmental Assessment Office.
Oak Bay, Gordon Head on a supplemental.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. I think the Minister may have missed the point. Pacific Booker doesn't know what the Section 17 order does because what they're supposed to do has not been conveyed to them with any certainty. So they are left with an uncertain order of which they don't know how to respond. So it's not possible for them to move through the regulatory process when that process has not been defined in which they could go. They've conducted detailed assessments of Morrison Lake and its internal wildlife, including measuring water quality and lake mixing patterns, as well as investigations into fish habitat and spawning patterns. They've pledged to use cutting-edge technology to reduce groundwater seepage from the tailings storage facility, and they've even completed a request, and they were the only one asked to do so, to comment on their implications of Mount Polly for their tailings management. Throughout the protracted environmental assessment process, Pacific Booker has stated its preference to use local suppliers and to hire local workers. The project would generate over 1,000 jobs in the region near Smithers, and it would provide millions of dollars in tax revenue. At a time when the provincial economy is reeling due to the efforts of COVID-19, the project would give that region a much-needed economic boost. My question again, Honourable Speaker, through you to the Minister of Environment is this. Given the extensive work undertaken by Pacific Booker Minerals to examine and reduce the environmental impact of the potential Morrison mine project and the potential economic benefit to the province, will this government commit to ensuring that the company receives a timely, unbiased review of the latest proposal and in particular is given clear instructions from your office so that it knows what boxes need to be ticked so that they can follow due process rather than second-guessing certain people who haven't made that very clear?
Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you again to the member for the supplemental question. The company, of course, has to provide some very specific additional information that was required under the order. The order was specific. Some examples of the type of additional information required are sockeye salmon use of Morrison Lake, Upper and Lower Tallow Creek, and the Morrison River, hydrogeological and groundwater data for areas between the mine and Morrison Lake, and further engagement with the Lake Babine Nation and other impacted First Nations. I'm advised that the company made its latest submission to the Environmental Assessment Office in December, and that Environmental Assessment Office staff met with the company this past February as additional information was required from the company. It is certainly not the intention of our government to make proponents guess at what is required. I've checked with the Environmental Assessment Office, and my understanding is staff there are working to help answer any questions that the proponent has with respect to the information required. I'm advised that the company plans to provide an update to the Environmental Assessment Office regarding their next steps, and the Environmental Assessment Office will be very happy to assist them in a timely answering of the questions required by the order. And as Minister, I assure that when the application is complete and ready for reconsideration, it will be considered in a timely manner. Thank you very much.